Hi, this is Judy at Judy in the Kitchen. Today I'm going to show you how to make oatmeal bread with the recipe I developed for my bakery. You can see I have a stand mixer bowl here because we're going to make this bread in a stand mixer. You can make it by hand if you really want to, but it comes out a lot better. It comes out just smoother and more elastic if you allow a stand mixer to do the work for you. Okay, so in this bowl I'm adding 1.5 cups of rolled oats. It can be quick oats, it can be regular old-fashioned. These are the old-fashioned. It really doesn't matter which you use. And then I have 1.5 cups of boiling water. Now I'm just going to pour that right in. Yes, it's boiling. Yes, I know it's too hot for the yeast. To that, I'm going to add 3 tablespoons or 1.5 ounces of butter. And I want 1/4 cup of honey. Now I have a little trick to show you here. I've got a 1/4 cup measuring cup and I've sprayed it with some nonstick spray. And so I'm going to add honey directly to that 1/4 cup measuring cup. Do it with 2 hands here, it might be a little faster. Spraying it with non-stick spray allows that honey to just flow right out of there. It's really pretty cool. Watch. See if I can turn it so you can see it. Just about all the honey flowed right on out of there. There's just a tiny bit that didn't flow right out, and I'm going to scrape that with my spatula. It's really the easiest way in the world. You see that came out really pretty clean. I love to measure honey that way. Okay, and then I have 1 tablespoon of brown sugar, 2 teaspoons of salt. I'm just going to stir this up and I'm going to put it on my stand mixer, and I'm going to use this dough hook, or not dough hook, but this attachment, and I'm going to just mix this up and allow those oats to cook with this. I want this to be blended very, very smooth, and then I'm going to allow it to cool down until it's 120 to 130 degrees Fahrenheit. And again, I'm going to use an instant read thermometer, and when I get to that point, we'll tune back in. Okay, my mixture has combined very, very well. You can see it's kind of a porridge texture, a little bit thinner than that, and that's what we want. Now, to that, I'm going to add 2 lightly beaten large eggs. I did not add the eggs earlier deliberately because of the boiling water. It would have cooked the eggs, and I would have had bits of cooked egg white in there and stuff, and I didn't want that. So I'm just going to stir this to combine it a little bit. No big deal. It doesn't have to be perfectly blended. Set that aside, and now I've got my dry mix. And here I have just some bread flour. It is 1 pound, 4 ounces of bread flour. And yes, you do want to use bread flour in this. It has a little more gluten in it than all-purpose flour, so it's going to give you a little more of that bread texture that you're looking for. And to this, I'm going to add 1/2 ounce or 2 packets of the RapidRise yeast. Now, in my bakery, I used to add potato starch to a lot of my breads, and to the oatmeal bread I did. It was 1 teaspoon per loaf. We're making 2 loaves here, so if you happen to have potato starch, you can add 2 teaspoons of it. I don't have any of that right now. It's an optional ingredient, but it does help to make the bread more moist and just really delicious. You could also, in place of that 1.5 cups of just plain water, you could have used water that you cooked potatoes in, and it'll have that potato starch in there. So next time you cook potatoes, if you want to make potato bread or any other type of bread that calls for water in the mixture, save some of that potato water for the sake of your bread, because the bread will be very happy with that. So now I'm just going to add this flour into this bowl, and I'm going to stir it to combine it so that when I turn the mixer on, I'm not going to have flour dust going all over the place. I'm going to use a dough hook for my kneading process in my stand mixer, and I'm going to allow it to mix on low speed for 8 to 10 minutes right in there, and I'll show you what it looks like when it's finished kneading for me. Now, while my dough is kneading in my stand mixer, I'm going to get my oven-proof box ready. I've got my lower rack at the bottom of the oven. I've got my top rack in the middle of the oven. I have a medium-sized saucepan that I have filled with water. I'm going to turn the stove on and bring that water to a boil. And I've turned on the light on my oven. When my loaves are formed, I'm going to put them on the top rack of the oven in that warm, moist environment and allow the dough to proof in there. It's the best place I have found to proof dough. And I even did this when I had my commercial bakery. It's a great substitute for a commercial proof box. Do not turn your oven on. If you happen to have a gas range, that's wonderful. The heat from the pilot light will contribute, as well as the heat from the light bulb and the heat from the boiling pan of water. But when this comes to a boil, I'm going to put it on the lower rack in the oven, and then whenever my bread is ready, I'm just going to put that on the top rack and allow it to sit. My dough has kneaded in my stand mixer for 10 minutes. You can see it looks very nice. It's well blended and smooth. Now we want to let it just rest for 10 minutes. So you just want to cover it up. I'm just going to put a plate on top of this. You could put a towel on there. I'm opting for a plate, less laundry. Be back in 10 minutes. My dough has rested and we're ready to move forward. I'm going to set this aside for just a second. And now I have my board where I'm going to roll the dough out. And I'm taking just a little bit of extra bread flour and I'm smoothing it onto the board. And you can see, not very much. This was 1 heaping tablespoon of flour. And you can see I'm not even using, not even half of it. Just a small amount. You really don't want to work in any more flour in that dough, especially now. Okay, so now we're going to remove this dough from the bowl. It's nice and sticky. Actually, that's the way I want it. Just a little sticky. I'm going to remove it all. I have 2 8x4 loaf pans that I've sprayed with nonstick spray. If you don't want to use that, you can just oil it or grease the pan in whatever way you choose to grease it. Okay, here's my dough. And I'm just going to form this into 1 rectangle and cut it in half with a sharp knife, just roughly. We're going to form the 2 loaves out of that. I'm really not trying to work the dough anymore at this point. I just want to form a couple of pretty loaves out of it. And to me, that is fine and dandy. And I'm just going to place it in the pan that's been oiled. Now I'll do the second one. You can see it's really not that hard to make a yeast bread. So many people are so afraid of working with the yeast. There's just some simple concepts involving it where you just don't want to kill the yeast. And that's all there is to it. Okay, here's my second pan. Placing the loaf right in there. And these are going to go in my oven that has been warming up with that hot water and the light bulb on the top rack above that pan of hot water. And I'm going to let it sit for roughly a half hour until these are about double in size. My bread has risen as much as I want it to go, and I actually let it stay in my oven proofer for 40 minutes. Now, there's several things you can do here. For one, I've turned on the oven. I've taken the pan of water out of the oven. I've turned it on, preheating it to 350. When the oven is preheated, then these are going to go in for 25 to 30 minutes until they're golden brown. Now what I used to do in the bakery and what I'm going to show you today is I have taken a whole egg and beaten it with just a little bit of water, perhaps about a tablespoon of water. And I'm going to brush the top of the loaf. You don't have to do this, but it does give it a nice shine and some color. If you just want shine, use an egg white only. If you just want color, use an egg yolk only. I use the whole egg, and that way I'll get some shine and some color on this. And then I'm going to sprinkle just a little bit of the dry oats on top of it, and the egg will help the oats to adhere and just make it kind of decorative. You don't have to do this at all. It's just kind of a nice way to dress up the bread. If you don't opt for this and you just bake it plain, which is perfectly fine to do, you could brush a little melted butter on the bread when it comes out of the oven, and that gives it a really pretty color and a little bit of gloss as well. So I've done both. It just depends on what kind of bread I'm making. I just think this makes it dressed up and it looks really pretty this way. And then you know what kind of bread it is when you see it. I will be back when the bread is baked and show you what the finished product looks like. Here are my 2 fabulous loaves of bread. You can't imagine how good it smells in here right now. Now, as tempting as it is, I want to advise you not to cut into them unless you're going to consume the whole loaf one way or the other. Because while it's hot like this, if you cut it, there's going to be a lot of steam that's going to escape through that cut part. And then, if you allow it to cool down from there while it's cut, the rest of the bread is going to be on the dry side because a lot of that moisture will have escaped through the cut. So it's really best to allow it to just cool down on a wire rack like this. Let me encourage you to try this recipe. It is fabulous. It was a big seller at my bakery all the time. I had some very steady customers who loved this bread. So let me encourage you to try it. Don't be afraid. Hopefully this will take some of the fear out of yeast bread making for you. This is Judy at Judy in the Kitchen. Have a wonderful day.